A new report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change indicates that the global temperatures are actually set to rise beyond the global limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius. That was the limit that was agreed on during the Paris Climate Accord. And the results of that are going to be absolutely devastating, but more importantly, the ramifications that we're already experiencing in this rapidly warming climate has already been incredibly devastating. So the outcome of this report indicates that we need widespread, rapid action in order to mitigate some of the most devastating impacts of climate change and at least slow down the rapid nature of the climate warming. So as Dr. Frederick Otto from the University of Oxford said, he's one of the authors of this IPCC report. Climate change is not a problem of the future. It is here and now and affecting every region in the world. The findings of the study indicate that carbon pollution has risen to such extremes that a key threshold in the fight to stop climate change, and that's limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century, will be crossed within 15 years. So I want to go to this video, which features the environmental reporter for the German outlet Deutsche Welle, and he explains what this report means in greater detail. Let's watch.
So what's the message then to governments around the world?
So world leaders pledged the Paris Agreement in 2015. They pledged to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures, and ideally to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now this 1.5 degrees C target, that's going to be broached in the next 20 years or so. And in all the scenarios that they consider, that these models kind of look at, in all of these scenarios except for one of them, they stay above 1.5, they keep getting worse. And the one in which we do manage to bring things back down by the end of the century and kind of meet this 1.5 degrees C target, that involves rapidly decarbonizing the economy and sucking enormous amounts of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And governments so far aren't doing that.
None of which we're doing.
Now, the key word there was governments, because this isn't just about the United States, although the United States has failed miserably in responding to climate change and changing human behavior. But this is something that we need collaboration on. This is something that we need to work with other countries on. And with the United States failing to even do its part, things are looking pretty grim because we need rapid action and we need it now. We need to decarbonize right now. And honestly, we're barely even headed in that direction.
Yeah, he sounded a bit like Dr. Strange there, talking to Tony Stark. I run all the scenarios. There's only one scenario in which we win. But unlike the Marvel comic universe, in the actual human-run universe, we're screwed. We're not gonna do that scenario. What does that scenario involve, by the way? Nearly ending all fossil fuels. We gotta go, we have to stop right now. Now, of course, in America, because half of our politicians are paid to manufacture doubt, and our media feels under some obligation to call things 50-50. They've gotten better on climate change, so they're calling it 75-25. They have manufactured enough doubt through their propaganda for you to go, oh my God, end fossil fuels, that's crazy. I mean, there's coal jobs in West Virginia. There's like, but we would have more jobs if we switched to solar, that's a fact. They would pay higher, that's a fact. But you never heard any of that. Oh my God, you're gonna cost jobs in West Virginia and Ohio or wherever else. There's no way we can do that. No, you're not getting it. Here in America, we're in a bubble. We're literally in a propaganda bubble. The rest of the world gets it and they can't believe we're not taking action. Unfortunately, some of the powerful in other countries like China barely get it because it's all about short-term profits, short-term gain. Meanwhile, we are unquestionably burning down the planet. But again, I go back to my wife's comment on this. The planet will be fine. It'll shake us off and then it'll recover and then new life will spring. But we're endangering our own existence in such a material way that they will look back at this time in history and go, that was stunning. It shows you the incredible power of human greed. It just is unstoppable, even when we're facing our own extinction.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned China, because China, of course, is part of this equation. So is Russia. So in China, they rely heavily on coal. In Russia, there's a reliance on natural gas, which of course emits methane into the atmosphere, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous, and only further accelerates climate change. And look, we're seeing the consequences of climate change today with wildfires, not just in the United States. I mean, in Turkey right now, the wildfires are out of control.
Yeah, the fires are out of control. I'm not sure how naturally occurring they were in Turkey.
Right.
With 12 fires seemingly lit in 12 different places at once. So,
oh, I didn't know that.
Okay, but we're not positive about that. It's a complicated international issue. But once they start, of course, they're very hard to control because of climate change.
Right.
And so, look, I know. Everybody's got their own agenda. So the Chinese blame the Americans blame the Chinese. You mentioned Russia, people scream Russiagate, right? And everything will be blamed on American imperialism and sometimes on the right things, right? So is it runaway capitalism? Yeah, it's partly that, for sure. Because the stock market says, what are you talking about? I want 15% growth every quarter, every year. I don't care. I don't care how you get it. And you will be judged on short-term profits. So it is incredibly hard to get off that treadmill, and power never concedes without a demand. And apparently our demand has not been sizable enough and forceful enough. And I mean politically, of course. And look, there are people like progressives, like Justice Democrats in Congress that are demanding it. This is gonna connect to another issue we're gonna talk about later in the show, which is the $3.5 trillion budget deal. They used to call it the infrastructure deal, but now people are playing politics and they're calling it the budget deal. Anyway, the bottom line is it has a little bit of Green New Deal in there. It needs to have a lot of it, but hey, it's a really good start. If we don't do that deal, then America is saying we're out. Yep. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. We're never gonna do anything. We're obsessed with money. We're obsessed with donors. We will take no action and we will actively burn down the planet. And by the way, including the state of California, the most prosperous state in America, is now being burnt to an absolute crisp. And it happens because of the same things. Corporate donors from PG&E giving money to politicians so they never regulate them. Climate change has made the trees like literal tinder and dry tinder. And so Siberia is on fire. We're all in great, great peril. But when you tell, look, last thing on this for me, when you tell right wingers in this country, and again, if you live outside of America, it's hard to believe, right? But if you tell them here that 99% of the world's scientists agree, it is definitely man-made, right? And we can show you the graphs here to prove it, right?
Let's put the first graph up.
Yeah, it's definitely real and it's definitely man-made. They say, no, we don't believe in your stinking numbers and scientists are evil. And so we have to debate them on whether science is real before we're gonna take action on this graph. Look at that graph, that it has already happened.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of the show, you see this massive spike in rising temperatures or rising climate of course, in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So beginning in the mid 1800s specifically, you start seeing that graph spike up, which obviously it shows the clear connection to human behavior. And real quick, I also think it's important to just quickly mention the methane component of this, because the report specifically focused on moving away from coal, but also moving away from drilling for natural gas, which is what emits methane into the atmosphere. They find that as the world shifts away from fossil fuels and tackles air pollution, those aerosols will disappear. There are certain aerosols that it's pollution, but it helps to reflect the sun's light, so the planet doesn't warm as quickly, right? But as we start dealing with fossil fuels, some of those aerosols who kind of, that have that effect might also disappear. So that might seem counterintuitive, right? But while also improving the air quality, said IPCC report summary author Maisa Rojas Corradi, an atmospheric scientist at the University of Chile. Now, on a global scale, methane emissions are responsible for around 30% of warming since the pre-industrial era, and that's according to the United Nations.
So I want to add one thing to that and then show you the second chart that I was alluding to. So a lot of the methane is trapped in the Arctic ice caps. And when the ice caps melt, the methane then goes in the atmosphere. You cannot get that back and put it back in the ice caps. The damage becomes irreversible. And it's, again, not in the future, it's happening now. It's happening now. So we're totally screwed. So let's show the second one. We already showed you the chart where it's going through the roof. This is similar, but the blue line in this chart shows you what would have happened if human drivers were not taken into account, what the normal pattern would have been given everything else that the planet is experiencing. The red line shows you what humans have done. And so, but yet people see these kind of charts in America and they say, I think the thermostat is lying. I think scientists are making up numbers all across the world and they just don't believe it. And there's no getting them to believe it. So we're frozen into inaction because the oil companies and coal companies purchase our politicians in America. That's bribery is legal, and then they manufacture doubt in enough of the electorate so that they can maintain their seats and their power. So $3.5 trillion, that's the deal. If that deal doesn't pass, honestly, the entire planet is screwed. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.